as athletes, if you are writing big checks into companies that aren't able to raise from sophisticated investors, you're more often going to lose than you're going to win.
Christian Ponder, thanks for coming in.
And Ponder is inside the 10 for a touchdown.
Quality over quantity.
Quality over quantity, unless you want to take less quality but smaller checks, and diversify your portfolio instead of going, writing big checks into 3 companies. Let's write small checks into 10 companies or 20 companies, whatever.
You described the post as like Soho House for athletes.
I was sitting in Soho House back in 2019, right? I joined Soho House as this thing to belong to after sports. I was sitting there feeling, hey, this space is beautiful. The idea is cool. These people are cool, but these aren't my people. Like, I don't fit in here. So that was a part of the genesis to what the post became.
Today on Portfolio Players, we sit down with former Minnesota Vikings quarterback Christian Ponder, a former college starter at FSU. He went 12th overall in the 2011 NFL Draft, and after his playing career in 2021, he founded The Post, an invite-only leadership network built by athletes for athletes, focused on business. Welcome back to Portfolio Players, presented by E-Trade from Morgan Stanley. I'm Dan Roberts here at Front Office Sports in New York, and today we've got the former NFL quarterback Christian Ponder. Thanks for coming in.
Thanks, Dan. Thanks for having me.
So 5 seasons in the NFL. On the field, you made more than $12 million. When did you start thinking about what to do with that money, knowing NFL, not for long?
Yeah.
When did you start setting up, you're wearing your brand here, The Post. When did you start setting up for the Post career?
Yeah, good question. Honestly, I think I was late to the game. I think the standard operating procedure for a lot of athletes is you find a financial guy, you give him your money, you don't worry about it. And that's what I did. And I think most athletes that should be the default. So I obviously had my portfolio that was typically stocks and bonds, what everyone has. Started to play around with taking more risk on, doing some venture deals, some private equity deals, things that, like we were talking earlier, like made sense to me. So as an athlete, right, consumer stuff focused around sports and nutrition, things that I was interested in and could see the value of. Like, started to build out a small portfolio of consumer deals, venture deals towards the end of my career. And then, but yeah, I think on paper, right, I got my undergrad in finance 2.5 years. I got my MBA while I was at Florida State. On paper, I thought I had it all figured out, what I want to do after football. And that transition still sucks, and I think you're still unprepared for it regardless of the amount of time you put in. Which was obviously the catalyst to the post. And that didn't really start, I didn't go all in until 3-4 years removed from my sports career, where I devoted not only a lot of bandwidth and time, but also my own financial capital to creating this company now. But I started to try to add some things, learn some things while I was tail end of my career, where I knew I wasn't going to have probably a 10, 11, 12 year career. I knew it was going to be probably, greater than average, but still not Hall of Fame career.
How did you try to self-educate during that time? I also feel like when we talk to athletes about their investments, a lot of what comes their way is due to their personal brand or reputation or their use of social media. So now things have evolved to where you sort of have to reverse engineer it and put yourself out there more so that you're known for certain things or to be a certain way or to be interested in certain areas of business. Yeah. And then people come to you with those deals.
Yeah, which is dangerous, right? Like, and I think what athletes need to do is, number one, right, if you think about a sports team, we have our own roles and expertises and experience that we're fit for. You need to either bridge the knowledge gap that you don't have when it comes to investing in risky deals, which are inherently a part of investing in early stage companies, or find a partner that has that knowledge that you can partner with to help you sort these deals. And there's a lot of bad deals out there. And I think athletes, right, people think dumb money. And typically that's where, if you can't raise from sophisticated investors at successful venture funds, then of course, like, let's go find the easy money that's out there. And so what I did, I asked people, hey, what are areas where I can learn, not only more information about the public markets, but how do I learn more about the private markets? And found, friends that I brought in my network who are managing directors of venture funds, would vet deals with them, but would learn, hey, what was the process for how you would look at a deal? But finding quote unquote teammates that had different experience and expertise where I could lean into that to de-risk, right? Like, that's what all investors do. How do I look at an investment, de-risk what is in front of me so that I can have better outcomes in the long term?
Yeah, you're kind of alluding a lot to the risk or the vulnerability of pro athletes who get approached. And, as you said yourself, like, solid career, not a Hall of Fame career, but 5 seasons in the NFL, respectfully, it's like you're known to football people, but you're not mega famous. And has that helped you or hindered you in the sense that there are guys who get approached just because the company or brand or startup knows like this is a famous person and will get to use and benefit from their face. So if you had to sort of scramble more for things like that, or do you get approached less, or maybe it's more within the football space?
Yeah, it's a good question. Look, I think the more famous you are, the more deal flow you'll have, right? Because I think there's an attraction to have someone who has a bigger name on your cap table. I still got a decent amount of deal flow, and now especially with the post, I think as our brand awareness grows and as we're building this company, there's definitely been more inbound, not necessarily for me, but like, hey, how do I get this in front of our community? Is potential, create SPVs and opportunities for a broader investment from our community to enter into portfolio companies. I think again, as much as you can figure out how to de-risk, invest less and not more. Well, I guess right. It's interesting.
Quality over quantity.
Quality over quantity, unless you want to take less quality but smaller checks, and diversify your portfolio instead of going, writing big checks into 3 companies. Let's write small checks into 10 companies or 20 companies or whatever. Again, I think this all goes to risk appetite, but these deals are inherently risky, right? Most of them are going to fail. You talk to a successful venture investor, it's like 1 out of 10, we want to return, 100x on our portfolio or investment, and we assume the rest are probably going to fail. And that's inherent part of this business. And as athletes, if you are writing big checks into companies that aren't able to raise from sophisticated investors, you're more often going to lose than you're going to win.
If it was easy, everyone would do it.
1,000%. Yeah.
Let's talk about the post.
Yeah.
Give me like the origin story, how it came about, the mission.
So the idea for the post was just rooted in my own journey after sports. So my last year was 2016 with the Niners, moved to New York City 6 months later, started the business chapter of my life, and went through a period where I missed athletes, still missed athletes. And not only from number one, a social standpoint, right? Human beings were built to belong to something, and you have such a strong built-in community that you belong to in sports. And communities are built around the boundaries of commonality. And I think as athletes, we have so much shared interest system, experience systems, value systems. And so I miss the social element of being a part of a team in sports. And there's no infrastructure for athletes after sports. And I will always see myself as an athlete. So I know I'll always be attracted to that group. But I also miss the whole ecosystem of sport, right? Everything's built around high performance. You're spending all your time every day with people who are super competitive, ambitious, hardworking, disciplined, accountable, gritty, determined. I was a benefactor of being in that space every day. And the corporate world is very different, and it feels like in so many ways, the corporate culture can be the antithesis to sports culture, where it's not always a meritocracy. A lot of people, they don't like feedback or they shy away from feedback. It's not always about the team. And knowing we're a product of our environment, and I had this identity of still being an athlete, and it felt like, kind of going in these spaces, you have to crank that down a little bit because you just don't want to ruffle any feathers. It was hard to adjust. And so the idea for the post was, how do we create something for lifelong athletes? People who will always see themselves that way, and build not only the social community, but this really powerful business network. There's a lot of data that shows the outperformance of athletes in business, right? 52% of women in the C-suite are former college athletes. 15 of the last 21 U.S. presidents were college athletes. An outsized number of Fortune 500 CEOs were college athletes. And female college athletes make up like 0.7% of the U.S. population. Former college athletes in general are like 1.5% of the U.S. population. So like it's a crazy amount of disparity in outperformance. And so how do we build the locker room and the team around athletes? And our qualifier for his athlete is anyone who's a college athlete or above. And yeah, it was really just to tap back into that community and that mindset that we could all benefit from, and having teammates to hold us accountable. And obviously it's more about performance in business and life and less about performance in sports. We have 1,000 members across country, average age is 40 years old, half our members are VP level and above. So we really feel like we're building this a really powerful, influential community.
Wow. It's social. It's really an events business in some way. It's business networking. Have you also heard about deals getting done through people meeting through the post?
Yeah, we have. There's been, we have a handful of venture capital, managing directors of venture capital firms that are using this as deal flow. We've got a number of people who are at corporate jobs that have left to start their own startups. So, and we're seeing this activity, and so we're thinking about, hey, do we ever have a fund that's tapping into our community, or just, hey, the power of this community uses as a vetting source for deals, but also potentially, because again, what we know about athletes, and especially athletes who have a tremendous amount of business experience, they make great leaders, they make great performers in business. And so can we have a talent part of this? So advisory business for startups or place people on founding teams. And then one thing that we're doing, what we feel like we have the veteran locker room. Right. So when I was a freshman in Florida State in the NFL or a rookie in the NFL, and you step into a locker room that had juniors and seniors or guys in the NFL who are on their 10th, 11th, 12th year, who know what it takes to be successful at that level in sports, it eases that transition for us when we enter as freshmen or rookies, right? We have these people to learn from who are de facto mentors, watch how they prepare and how they operate to be successful. And that's what we have in business. We have all these veteran locker room or veterans in business who are former athletes who know that transition is difficult. How do we leverage this community to invest in, our slogan is leaders built by sport. How do we invest in the future generation of leaders built by sport, whether that's current college athletes, and we're kind of running a beta program on mentorship one-on-one, pairing our members with college athletes, but also professional athletes. And, we've talked about the knowledge gap that some athletes possess when it comes to investments. How do we close that gap? And so we're actually partnering or preparing a program in collaboration with NYU Stern School of Business's executive education program, first focusing on entrepreneurship that we'll do in March. It's open to all professional athletes. But the idea is, for that specific program, anyone that has a professional athlete that has a business idea or is interested in entrepreneurship, how do we bring in you day one, put you this 4-day program split between the Post's campus, Clubhouse, and NYU's campus. And at the end of the day, walking with an idea that's validated, figuring out how to pitch a company, how put you through some sales training, just a better understanding of, hey, is this a legitimate idea? And the origin story of that was we had a woman who, professional soccer player, has been on the U.S. women's national team, well-known athlete. And she was in our Clubhouse a handful of months ago, and she was working on a brand deal with a skincare company. And, obviously she probably got a one-time check or whatever and probably made good money off that deal, but it's a one-time transaction, right? And obviously this company sees the ROI of that one-time check is greater because this person has 1 million followers on Instagram. She's a very authentic brand, a captivated audience. And that's when I sparked this idea of like, well, what if you created your own skincare company, right? What if you monetize your own audience where you could see much more of that ROI? And I get, look, that's easier said than done, but you can do it. People do it all the time. I think athletes, we create these artificial ceilings for ourselves because we're not domain experts. Well, let's find you a teammate that's a domain expert and you can go be a co-founder in a business. And so that was the catalyst to creating this, what we're calling Entrepreneurs Built by Sport program with NYU Stern School of Business Executive Education program. And then the idea was, let's go take this to a venture capital track, a private equity track, and bridge the gap of this knowledge gap. Because what athletes possess, they have the soft skills, right? They have these intangibles. Now let's just help you figure out the knowledge gap and the hard skills gap, which is a lot easier to develop than developing grit and perseverance. And we've figured that out through a long time in sports and doing hard things every day.
That's a lot of different tentacles.
Yeah. Sorry, that was very long-winded too.
I saw a story and it was either the article or you described the Post as like Soho House for athletes. And I was just going to say, that actually sounds kind of limiting. Like it's clearly a lot more than that.
It is. The part of the origin story was I was sitting in Soho House back in 2019, right? I joined Soho House as this thing to belong to after sports. And I was sitting there feeling, hey, this space is beautiful. The idea is cool. These people are cool, but these aren't my people. Like I don't fit in here. What if everyone in here was an athlete? That would feel like home for me. So that was a part of the genesis to what the Post became. But it felt like, look, if we get a bunch of competitive, ambitious people just in a bar drinking together and hanging out, yeah, that's fun to a certain extent, but it feels a little short-sighted. And so we wanted to expand it outside of just a 4-wall space. And that's where we started studying things like YPO and EO and Chief and Vistage and some of these really powerful business networks. And how do we'll get out together and hang out and enjoy each other's company. And we have the physical space in New York City that we call our Clubhouse. It's kind of our slight nod to Soho House. But, 1,000 members, the vast majority are not in New York where our space is. And it's really about personal and professional growth and building a really powerful network outside of just a 4-wall space.
Yeah. Yeah. What's funny is as I hear you talk about like the transition, and I loved when you said there's no infrastructure for athletes after sports, it sounds a little bit like post-military.
Yeah.
And you hear the same kind of things about people who are veterans.
Yeah.
And in one sense, that's like an evergreen problem that's been the case for years. But also right now, there's obviously something happening specifically with college sports and the professionalization of college sports. You played at FSU, which is right at the center of all this. It's conference realignment. It's the explosion of NIL money and NIL deals. Yeah. I mean, what's your take on like what we're seeing with the business of college sports going nuts?
It's a complex issue, right? As an athlete, as a former college athlete, would I have loved to make money off of my name, image, and likeness as the university did? Yeah, of course. And I think that's what's fair. I think what we're seeing right now, though, is a lot of NIL money is not related to what NIL was intended to be. It's pay for play. And I don't think that that's necessarily the right thing to do. So there's a lot, and how right, as a student athlete, how am I not treated like a regular student where if I'm no longer wanting to be at this university, I can transfer without penalty, which obviously is the case now with the transfer portal rules that have updated 5-6 years ago. But that's really hard for coaches, right? And I think one thing that isn't discussed very much is the burnout that we're going to see with coaches, because their job was 10 years ago, I recruit high schoolers and I coach my team, right? And now it's I recruit high schoolers, I recruit my own team to stay, I recruit the transfer portal, I'll deal with all the NIL stuff, I recruit my team, or I coach my team. I can't coach my team too hard because if I make them mad, they'll leave. So it's such a complex issue. So I look, I think at the highest level, I think athletes should make money off their name, image, and likeness. I think there's got to be much more structure in place on how that's actually done. I would love to see the expansion of the playoff system. I have
beyond 12 even?
Beyond 12. I actually have a proposal.
But then where do you stop it?
I don't know. But I think this is going to be a hot take. I think bowl games should be played at the beginning of the season, right? We've already seen some of this, right? We've seen the Chick-fil-A kickoff games and all this stuff. But we're losing the incentive of bowl games, right? Like no one watches 80% of these bowl games now. When you have now teams, right, who have 5-win seasons are in these bowl games, and it's just not compelling to watch. And now your star players aren't playing. And so if how you play this season determines what bowl game you play in the start of the season, then the game matters, right? It matters. Your star players will play. There's a lot of interest regardless of what bowl game it is. I want to see the first game of my season in these different locations. So I think bowl games should be placed at the beginning of the year, expand the playoffs, because that's what everyone's watching at the end of the year anyways. I don't know where it stops. Does it go to 12 to 24? I don't know. It can't be March Madness, right? We can't have 64.
Well, there's always going to be one school that is just on the outside, the first out.
Well, that was funny, right? We thought expanding it to 12 was going to end the conversation. No, it's just who are the last 4 in and who are the last 4 out. Like that will always be the argument. So look, that debate will never go away. But it's got to get cleaned up. And the problem is a CBA probably has to be in place, but is that CBA against the NCAA? Well, is the NCAA going to be around in 5 years? Is that CBA against each conference, against each university? Who's negotiating on the player's behalf to create that CBA? 20 to 25% of your athletes are leaving every year because they're graduating. You have an incoming class. Like it's really difficult. And I don't know how it gets resolved. I feel like we'll still have this conversation 10 years from now about like, it is a mess.
Yeah. When you talk about like all of the different burdens that the coaches have to worry about now, that's also totally true. Although the retort to that is, well, they get paid handsomely for it.
Yeah.
The amount of money. And as we tape this, we've seen got to be a record number of head coach firings this early in the college football season. We're halfway through. A quarter of the SEC coaches, 4 of the 16 have been canned. And people look at the buyout numbers.
It's crazy.
And they're just kind of mind-boggling.
Yeah, how can you say we're going to pay a coach to not coach here anymore and say we're going to cut this women's sports program at the same university, right? And that's a shame. And that is terrible. And so I don't know if there needs to be caps, but look, then you're looking at capitalism and like I don't know. Again, this is why it is a complex issue. And I don't know, I'm not informed enough to make some really strong opinions on some of these things. But what I do know is it needs to get resolved.
When you look at your kind of membership, everyone was a college athlete.
Yeah.
Like, has this but you're all former athlete, you're graduates, right? You're not working with current college athletes.
Correct.
I mean, has this become either a hot topic or something that people at the events are kind of looking at? And you might see that people who flow into the organization in the more recent years, you miss NIL, but they might benefit from it more and have more to invest in things.
Yeah. Yeah, so we do an annual conference that we call Summit. It's our one time a year. It's our big temple event to bring as many of our members together in person since our members are all scattered throughout the country. And so we had this first week of October in Austin, Texas. And the second night, we had a big conversation about the current state of college sports. And we put out there like, hey, we all have a vested interest in what's going on. Do we want to have a more public opinion? Do we want to try to get involved? And it was a resounding yes. Obviously, we have a ton of people super passionate about this. We have one member who was a track athlete in Wisconsin. She's a chief marketing officer at a big company. And Wisconsin's going through some issues right now around their indoor track team, and they're building a new facility, and they conveniently forgot to have a facility for indoor track. And so it's becoming an issue, and very passionate about this. And so we have a lot of members who are passionate about this. So we are in talks with some groups trying to be a part of the conversation, because it does feel like conferences have a lot to say. Obviously, athletes, have some part of the conversation, but former athletes are really not part of the conversation. And with 1,000 former college athletes who have some level of leadership and business experience, I think would have a lot to contribute to these conversations. So we're trying to figure out, the wedge into DC as some of these policies are shaped at that level, at the governmental level, and can we help shape some of these policies? And so I think we'll make some announcements around that in the coming months, but we'll definitely be a part of that conversation.
If we talk about media specifically, and I know you guys did a partnership with Players Tribune at one point, which I remember was one of the earliest examples of athlete-led media.
Yeah.
And we're talking about how crucial it is to be on social media. Obviously, your wife, Sam, is a media figure and was at ESPN a long time. What do you make of sort of the interplay there, and whether athletes now are just kind of doing things in their own way, or it's like, yes, there's new media, yes, there's a whole new way of telling stories, but also in some ways, things stay the same, and some traditional parts of media don't really change.
Yeah, look, I think athletes are more empowered than ever to own their stories. But I think with that comes more responsibility. Like, I think if you're going to be public with opinions, you better be informed on that opinion that you're publicly going out with. But I think it does. It gives athletes leverage to certain things. I mean, it's been amazing. It's been really interesting to see it play out with the WNBA. And some of these players going out publicly after the commissioner in the WNBA, and obviously they're in the midst of these new CBA talks. We'll see how that plays out. In my mind, it does give athletes, as long as it's the right person who's part of the conversation, but it does give you more leverage. It does give you more ownership, right? Like, I can own my story. It used to be, hey, I share my story in a sit down session with a reporter, and I'm not a part of those edits, right? I'm not a part of that final story. And now I get to craft more of that narrative, because so much of stardom is built around narratives, and to give more athletes that empowerment to control their narrative, I think is really important. But again, like, there's a lot of responsibility to that.
Yeah. Does it surprise you the extent to which, especially not just the NFL, NBA, WNBA, but athletes now are very vocal about their opinions, the sort of increasingly political about their opinions?
Yeah. Is it surprising? No, I think that's probably, if you look at kind of demographics as a whole, I think younger people are more outspoken. I think that the big catalyst to that is social media. Like, we have a medium through which to express these opinions. So I think that's just a natural thing. I think people, right, we went through this part of culture 5-6 years ago that cancel culture was a big thing. I think we've moved somewhat past that, and people are, I think, more empowered to express their opinions that might not be mainstream. So I don't think it's surprising.
We've talked a lot about college and that sort of aspect, everything that's happening there. A couple more on the NFL. What do you make of some of the recent ownership changes, private equity coming into the league, and a lot of teams kind of moved pretty quickly to do PE stakes, and obviously franchise valuations just keep going up across the league with NFL, NBA, especially in the NBA, a lot of recent team sales. But you look at all that, and it kind of seems like owning a piece, whether it's even as an LP, getting into NFL ownership seems like it's the brass ring.
Yeah, look, I think it was the right decision, because, to your point, like, valuations have been growing before this private equity decision. There's very few people that can write that check. And so I think this was the only solution to allow some liquidity for some of these owners. But it has been amazing to see how much capital is going into sports. And I don't know if we're in a bubble, but if you look at linear TV, live sports is what's keeping linear TV alive. And so it is a tremendously valuable asset. What is interesting is watching this ESPN YouTube TV saga play out. As a YouTube TV subscriber, it is really painful on Saturdays to not have access to college football. And but it's interesting to see all these media rights deals but the valuations. I mean, again, like if you look at all of the most watched television, it's all sports, mainly football, but obviously NBA is also part of that. But live sports is saving television. I think those valuations will continue to grow up. At some point, it'll be a bubble. But the private equity solution, I think, was the only solution to provide some liquidity and access to people to be a part of these opportunities.
This is one of the few portfolio players where so far we haven't talked much about ownership, or you haven't brought up ownership, but right now every athlete, celebrity, Hollywood actor wants to get a piece of some kind of pro team.
Yeah.
Is that on your wish list ultimately?
Not right now. I think we have a member who owns a American football team in Europe, and some of that kind of sexy. It's hard because it's hard to find a deal. Like we just talked about, the valuations are really, really sky high. If you try to find something that's an emerging league or an emerging sport, obviously it's such a riskier asset. We don't know how those are going to play out. Even stuff like Unrivaled, 2 years in, or we have one season done and their valuation is almost 400 million or whatever it is now. Like, some of the stuff is a bit scary. Obviously, I think that it is a tremendous success story already. I think that'll continue to be a success story. I think they've built a really unique business, and especially for giving opportunities to WNBA players to make more money in the off seasons and not go overseas. Would it be cool? Yes. Is it a priority right now? No.
Who, as you look around, either former NFL guys, people you've met through the post, but who do you look at, former athletes, that you think like they've done it right?
He's not a former athlete, but I think Kelvin Beachum is such a tremendous example of someone who's really built a tremendous portfolio off the field. Him and Larry Fitzgerald are doing a lot around the private equity and venture capital space. He's done so many deals. He's built a tremendous network, and all while still playing on the field and playing, having a really successful NFL career. I mean, his 12th or 13th year. He's with the Cardinals now. I think he's such a tremendous example. And Larry, the amount of stories I've heard about Larry, like meeting with, while still playing and always flying to Dallas, hey, Mark Cuban, do you want to meet for dinner? Or like, can you come to the hotel and like, let me pick your brain? Like, just leverage the platform he had to set himself up for tremendous success in life after sports. And so I think those two guys immediately come to mind as tremendous examples of what it means to leverage what you do on the field to have a successful business career post-sport.
Let's end on this. Always fun to ask, but any decisions you've made that were mistakes in hindsight or that you regret, pitfalls, things you've learned from, like, all right, that was not right?
Yeah, I mean, probably a ton. I think they all come back to, I have a theory in life, like my biggest regrets, the things that I did do that I wish I did not do, or the things that I did not do that I wish I did. The hurdle there was always some level of insecurity or fear, and so if I did a deal that I didn't want to miss out on because of the FOMO and wanted, be a part of the conversation in the locker room, that ended up being a crap deal. Like, it was because, I rushed through. I didn't do the due diligence. I just wanted to be a part of the conversation and be quote unquote cool and be in the in crowd or whatever. So I think as I think back, it's always trying to move too fast or some level of that insecurity of missing out or not being part of the conversation. And when you try to quiet your gut down, that's always a mistake.
FOMO, never good.
No, never good.
Christian, thanks so much.
Yeah. Thanks,
good
man.
talk.
Yeah, appreciate you having me.